So I've never covered music on this channel before, and I think the best way for me to give it a single introduction to my music taste is by revealing that Fall Out Boy is my favorite band. And that's what we're here for today. I'm going to do a Fall Out Boy album tier list. I'm going to rank their album discography. For long time or hardcore rock fans, maybe Fall Out Boy isn't considered the best or most influential band ever, but I'm not going to give you the whole story, but it is my favorite band of all time. Um, been a fan since around 2007, which is pretty much around the time I first started getting into music, and I've been a fan since. So, ranking this tier list, once again, in my opinion, this is just my opinion. But also, I think it's pretty interesting to rank Fall Out Boy's discography specifically because their sound has changed so much over the years, which is hopefully something I'll be able to illustrate throughout this tier list. So, yeah, let's get into it. Their first album, Fall Out Boy's "Take This to Your Grave." This came out in around I think 2003, so that means we're coming up on the 20th anniversary of Fall Out Boy if it already hasn't happened yet, because they did release like an EP or two before Take This to Your Grave. But Take This to Your Grave is a great album. I think with a lot of debut albums, specifically in the rock scene, debut albums, debut rock albums often capture this magic, and whether or not that magic is a sound or a style that becomes influential, or just capturing this raw organic process of just normal people coming together create an album. Oftentimes it's people sleeping in the studio or just doing it in each other's houses, and I think "Take This to Your Grave" is a great example of that. Other examples like American Football's first album, or that one Operation Ivy album we got. And I think that Fall Out Boy maybe not as influential as those last two albums I mentioned. I do think it did serve as a blueprint for the pop punk scene. There's a lot of great hooks in this. um, a lot of long titles. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's a great album. I do think it's aged well. I do think it's aged well. Takes It to Your Grave, pop punk, really really good. Next is From Under the Cork Tree. I probably could put this at a B tier. From Under the Cork Tree. Yeah, yeah. It's as an album, I don't really revisit it as much, but I think that the good tracks are very strong. I think lyrically, it's pretty interesting to look into this because during the production of this album, Pete Wentz did have his suicide attempt. So in songs such as, I'm trying to remember because they're very long song names. I think it's like 7 Minutes in Heaven. And that was pretty interesting. This album has themes of not feeling comfortable with yourself, not feeling satisfied with it. Not a new theme by any means, but definitely very interesting once you kind of consider Pete Wentz's suicide attempt. I did have more to say about this. Um, I preferred the sound of "Take This to Your Grave" a little bit more, just because it was more fun. I do think that with this album, there's more of a pressure to create a good album. With "Take This to Your Grave," it was just high schoolers coming together to make music. The passion, the energy was there, and for From Under the Cork Tree, I think the pressure did it obviously got to Pete a little bit, but I think in terms of constructing, it kind of sacrificed some level of commercial appeal. Um, for substance. I'm trying to come up with the words, but you know, hopefully that kind of came across. Hopefully, I was able to illustrate what I mean by that. But yeah, good album. Songs like "Sugar We're Going Down," which is one of Fall Out Boy's most recognizable songs. "Dance Dance," which has one of my favorite hooks ever. 16 Candles. Our Lawyer Made Us Change the name of the song so we won't get sued. Of All the Gin Joints of the World. All great tracks, and still an album that's good. Not one of their strongest because Fall Out Boy would go on to top it later for me to never really even think about this again. So Infinity on High, if I'm gonna make a hyperbolic statement, to me, Infinity on High is the best album I've ever heard. Infinity on High is my favorite album of all time. And I have a lot to say about it. Nothing like of sentimental value, just trying to describe why I like it so much. Um, this is in terms of the sound, this is still very much pop punk. But I do love the genres that they decide to blend. Um, Infinity on High has elements of flamenco, believe it or not, funk, R&B, and while there's no like rock R&B track, there's no rock funk track in here. It's able to take elements of those genres and still blend it into its pop punk, and still at its core pop punk album, which is great. Um, there are albums that have tracks that work together cohesively in one body in one project, and then there's albums in which each song stands strong individually. You know what I mean? Where each song kind of takes turns being your favorite off the album. And Infinity on High for me checks off both those boxes. Songs like, oh man, like where do I begin? Thriller, The Takes Over, The Breaks Over, This Ain't a Scene, It's an Arms Race, I'm Like a Lawyer, um, Bang the Doldrums. I could name this entire album, and I'm not really as good with being articulate about how music sounds and what it accomplishes. I'll just say that this album sounds great to me. That's all I'll really say, and move on. Yeah. Anyways, Folie à Deux. So Folie à Deux came after Everything on High, and at the time of its release, people did not like this album. This had a very mixed reception. People thought that Fall Out Boy was changing their sound too much. This is Fall Out Boy's most alternative sounding record. Um, you know, yeah, I wouldn't really consider this pop punk anymore. Definitely more alt rock. And so the fans didn't want Fall Out Boy to change their sound. They wanted more Infinity on High. They wanted more From Under the Cork Tree. They wanted more Take This to Your Grave. They even booed people, or not booed people, fans even booed the band if they played songs off this record on tour. And this was one of the reasons why Fall Out Boy went on hiatus, was because of partly because of the backlash of this album. But since the years have gone on, this album has aged to become often considered Fall Out Boy's best album. I think this album has aged the best, arguably the best. And like I said, it's the popular pick for Fall Out Boy's best record. Um, some great tracks like I Don't Care, which is kind of this angsty, I would call it coming of age anthem, but not really. But there's that. There's the very anthemic songs like Coffees for Closers and Disloyal Order of the Water Buffaloes. And then you have, oh my gosh, the strings. What I love about this album is there's certain string sections like in Coffees for Closers, it has this extended outro with strings and it sounds beautiful. You have an interesting ballad song like What a Catch Donnie, which is one of the best vocal performances from Patrick Stump. You even have like a kind of like a Broadway-esque tune, which is $20 Nosebleed. Um, yeah, I don't really know what else to say about it. This is their most alternative record, but yet it's aged the best. And I think that this shows that Fall Out Boy is experimenting, but still both comfortable with their sound. This album doesn't sound anything like these albums, and yet um, it's still one of the best. It's not my favorite from theirs, but it's sure a close second. It's sure a close second. Save Rock and Roll. So this was the first album Fall Out Boy had post hiatus, and I think it's also one of the best. I love this album. It came out in 2013. Save Rock and Roll, and Fall Out Boy really had to change their sound. They had to change their sound to kind of stay relevant within the new kind of pop rock appeal of the time that it came out, while also sticking to their core roots. And I have to give it to Fall Out Boy here because I think they accomplished exactly that. They made a commercially appealing record with with enough blend into pop while still being rock, while still maintaining their main sound and their main core and resonating with their main core audience. There's a lot of hard tracks in here, like the Phoenix, um, my song, my songs know what you did in the dark, which is one of Fall Out Boy's most popular songs. The Mighty Fall, and it also has nice pop blends like Miss Missing You, Young Volcanoes. Try to think of others. I think this album is perfect too, kind of like these three. I think the main drawback is features. Features from the likes of Big Sean, Courtney Love, Foxes, and even Elton John. I think the features can be pretty hit or miss. I prefer the features as kind of like background support. You know what I mean? Um, like I don't think Big Sean needed a whole verse, to himself. I don't think Courtney Love needed a whole verse to herself. I preferred Courtney Love's vocals when it kind of served as like an interlude between verses. But I think the features on this album is probably its biggest drawbacks, which was kind of Fall Out Boy's way of kind of accepting commercial appeal while paying homage to past rock legends and such. But I think as far as pop rock goes, this is probably my favorite album in terms of pop rock. Next is American Psycho, which can really be described as a pop record, if in all honesty. I think it's good. I think that its strong tracks are still really strong, such as Uma Thurman. I really love Jetpack Blues. I really like Novocaine. Um, I mean, there's definitely other songs that I like, but I'm just trying to think of what else to say. I mean, this is their most pop record. You could consider this a pop album with songs like Fourth of July, Favorite Records. Fall Out Boy kind of dips into the territory of being like overproduced songs like Centuries, which is one of Fall Out Boy's biggest songs too. But I can see why people don't like that song because it does sound pretty overproduced. Um, I think that Fall Out Boy kind of dived a little bit too much into the pop sound here. Nothing wrong with pop music. I love pop music, but they're not nearly as comfortable as they were in the likes of Infinity on High or Save Rock and Roll, which is why I have it at B. Yeah. So last but not least, Mania. The Fallout, not the Fallout, the rollout for this album was really interesting because by the time this album released, 5 of the songs from this 10-track album were released. So before the album even drops, you've already heard half the album. Um, I don't know why I kind of had this preface, but it's their worst album, if I'm being really honest. I kind of talked about how Fall Out Boy was starting to get less comfortable in their sound with American Psycho. Still, accomplishing the genre mix pretty well, but not as comfortable. In Mania, I find them the least comfortable. In Mania, they kind of did like a clean slate. They had to redefine their sound once more. They experimented with the likes of reggaeton and tracks like Hold Me Tight or Don't or Sunshine Riptide, as well as electropop with songs like The Last of the Real Ones and Young and Menace, which is a huge flop. I did not like what they did with Young and Menace. I think there's some strong tracks on Mania, such as Heaven's Gate and The Last of the Real Ones being two of my, some of my favorite Fall Out Boy songs ever. But then you have generic songs like Champion and Bishop's Knife Trick. I've never considered Fall Out Boy to be generic at all. I don't know if I did a good job, but all these albums up here are vastly different sonically. And yet this album right here, Mania, is the most experimental with the likes of electropop, reggae, even elements of gospel and soul. And yet they still come away with some generic rock tracks like Champion, which is cliche lyrically, sounds like something for a movie trailer, and Bishop's Knife Trick, which sounds like any other arena rock song you might find in a commercial. Uh, yeah, I mean, I still love tracks like Last of the Real Ones, Church, Heaven's Gate. But yeah, it's very interesting how this could be like their most experimental album and still have some generic tracks. It's only 10 songs, so there's no room for error, and yet they still managed to do that. They even delayed this album because they weren't satisfied with the original product, so they delayed it for a handful of months, and they still came away with their worst album. Um, it's hard to say where Fall Out Boy is going to go after this. If you look at this album, which has elements of dubstep, overproduced rock pop songs versus Take This to Your Grave, which is a pretty grounded pop punk record. I don't know where Fall Out Boy is going to go from here, but otherwise, this is my tier list. Hopefully, you kind of understand what I'm trying to get at with my descriptions of each of these albums. This is kind of mainly for Fall Out Boy fans because they know what these sound like. I'm not as good with describing music, but hopefully you enjoyed. This is my official list of my ranking tier list of my favorite Fall Out Boy albums. We have first Infinity on High, my favorite album of all time, followed by Folie à Deux and Save Rock and Roll, which I deem as their 3 best. Then Take This to Your Grave, From Under the Cork Tree, American Psycho, American Beauty, American Psycho, and Mania. So yeah, thanks for watching. I'll catch you later.